Michael Fairbrother and Berniece de Berg join me from Moonlight Meadery to discuss mead. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 197. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 197, and it's early August 2019. Michael Fairbrother and Berniece de Berg from Moonlight Meadery join me to talk about mead. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They're currently offering 20% off their all-access subscription pass, with access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com/beersmith to get your all-access pass today. Again, that's beerandbrewing.com/beersmith. And also the Brew Easy. Brew big in small places with the all-grain ultra-compact system from Blickman Engineering. The Brew Easy's revolutionary setup combines batch sparge efficiency, brew-in-a-bag simplicity, and the wort clarification of a rim system. It's easy to set up, easy to operate, and easy on the eyes. Plus, it's fast and conveniently sized to help you save space and gain speed without compromising quality. Add the optional Brew Commander, and you get precise temperature control for mash automation. With the Brew Easy, you'll discover the definitive proof that size isn't everything. Electric and propane models are available. It's also the system that I brew on. Visit blickmanengineering.com for more information about the Brew Easy. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And finally, BeerSmith 3 is available now for download, and also the mobile version's out. BeerSmith 3 adds mead, wine, and cider support to the BeerSmith platform, along with new integrated water profile and mash pH tools. Dozens of new features, including cloud folders, updated databases, support for fruit juice and honey, as well as new Whirlpool hop options. Download your free 21-day trial from beersmith.com today and give it a try. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome Michael Fairbrother and Berniece van der Berg. Michael is founder and head mead maker at Moonlight Meadery, and Berniece is co-founder and vice president of marketing. It's great to have you guys back on the show. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Brad.
And first-time guest, Berniece, how are you?
Doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's great to have both of you on the show. I've known you for, probably 9 or 10 years now. Fantastic to have you back. Michael, what have you been up to at Moonlight Meadery since the last time we had you on? I think it was over a year ago now.
I've created so many more new meads. We've been playing around. We have a Lunar Society, which is a small group of dedicated fans that I make specialty batches for. So I've been playing around with new offerings from our coconut mead. We've made 3 different batches of that now. We're doing a banana and maple syrup mead that's going to be similar to a banana bread type of flavor, but really trying to go a little more heavy on the fruit, a little more art in the glass is what I like to describe it.
So you actually going heavy on some of your classic ones as well, or?
Yeah, we've completely reformulated red dress so that we're using twice as much red currant as what we used to. So you'll see a noticeably different shade of color to it as the new ones roll across the country.
Interesting. And what are some of your top selling meads at the moment?
No Need to Argue is our number one bestseller now. It sells 2-to-1 over Kurt's Apple Pie, and that's a cranberry mead.
Really? Cranberry does very well, huh?
It's really balanced. So the acidity from the cranberry and the tartness really kind of accent the honey and give it a nice crisp, sweet, not super sweet finish, but really enjoyable and drinkable. We're going to be releasing it nationwide in the next month or so.
I made a cranberry mead. It was excellent for like 6 or 8 months, and then for some reason it kind of turned. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but don't know.
A lot of chances for things to go wrong.
Yeah, there are always opportunities for things to go wrong. Well, Berniece, it's great to have you on the show. What are you doing? How are you? What have you been up to?
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. I know we've crossed paths many times over the last 9 years. I was away for a part-time sabbatical for a while, helping raise 3 granddaughters, but back full-time and helping Moonlight Meadery to move full speed ahead.
And I understand you head up marketing. What are some of the marketing tools you use?
Oh, we have quite the plethora of a marketing mix. We're very, very big on social media. Anything from Facebook to Twitter. We use Instagram, Pinterest, all of those tools. We have quite a large Facebook following. We do newsletters, press releases, and we still continue to enter a lot of competitions. We've won we've won every commercial competition we've ever entered. Well, we've at least won something at every single competition we've ever entered.
Wow.
So quite the mix.
And you have much broader distribution than most meaderies too, right, Berniece?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how many states are you in now?
We self-distribute in New Hampshire, and then we're in about, it changes from time to time, about 30 states in the United States. And we've shipped to Australia, Hong Kong, and recently we got into Canada. Nice.
Yeah, I know I've been able to buy it here on the shelf in Virginia now, which is great.
Yes, we're very happy about that.
Well, Michael, I understand National Mead Day was just a short time ago. Maybe it was on August 3rd. Can you tell us a little bit about National Mead Day and some of the things going on?
Sure. So National Mead Day is the first Saturday of August. Originated from the American Homebrewers Association. So a lot of the professional meaderies like to help embrace and do mead classes and talks on mead making and such. So we made 2 types of mead that day, really trying to focus on some local honey. So I bought some London, our meaderies in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and that's where we got our honey from. And I made a couple different really heavy fruit meads. I've got one with cranberries, sour cherries, blueberry, elderberry, and pomegranate. And then the other one's more of a blueberry berry combo mix type of one, which started at 40-degree bricks. So 1.160 starting gravity.
Nice. That's pretty cool. And what are some of the other activities going on?
So we had a lot of in-store or in-meadery demonstrations, basically giving free tours to people as they came through on the day and trying to explain about mead and how there's so many different varieties of mead, whether it's session, in a can, sparkling and low in alcohol, to the heavy hitters that most of what we're known for.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen an increase in interest in mead recently? Is it still growing?
It's nonstop. We've just sold over 1,000 cases in the month of July. So I'd say we're seeing a lot of business, and we're seeing the chain authorizations coming through where some of the bigger grocery store chains across the country have reached out for samples and have rolled it across. So, for example, you can go to Cost Plus World Market now and find at least 2 of my meads in almost every single store they have. And
I found it in, I think it was Total Wine had it as well.
Yeah, we're in Total Wine nationwide, Whole Foods nationwide. There's Specs in Texas, Bevmo out in California and Washington. But yeah, we're seeing some pretty good growth that it's a little, some days hard to imagine, but we're happy to be at the forefront, and we continue to talk to meaderies that are in planning and try to offer guidance and help us where we can.
And is there growth going on at the Mead Association level? I know the homebrewer market, for example, kind of flattened out there for the last several years.
Yeah, it's really taken on a whole new. It's been a few years since I've been president, but the homebrewing side is really taken off. There's a lot more discounts on honey and some of the ingredients that mead makers might want to be involved in. It's well worth the cost of admission. I don't even think the Brewers Association gives out as many discounts as what the American Mead Makers Association is doing right now.
And I did see this year at HomebrewCon, there was an increased presence too. There was a number of booths that had significant mead selection, a couple of them just entirely mead.
Yeah, the AMMA had a booth at Club Night, which was really nice to see, and there was a lot of home mead makers there. Of course, we were there presenting and pouring our meads as well. And Ancient Fire, I think they had their meads at the at the talk Jason was on, but several others as well.
Well, Berniece, we also have National Honey Day coming up on August 17th. What is National Honeybee Day?
That's right. Yes, National Honey Bee Day is on the 17th of August, and it's a day to recognize the honeybee and just how important the honeybee is to our food supply chain. The Apis mellifera species actually contributes to over 85% of our food supply chain, and the plight is real. They have many things that are affecting their numbers, which obviously affects our honey yields as well, but they are extremely important to our pollination. For a perspective for your listeners, think about this. About every third bite of food that we take has been pollinated by a honeybee. So National Honeybee Day is a good day to highlight anything to do with the honeybee and what we can do to help save the honeybee and keep those numbers going.
And I keep reading these doomsday articles saying that the honeybees are all going away and there's all these problems. Is that true or not?
The honey yields, most beekeepers do report loss of hives. Now, there's a natural culling obviously that happens typically during the winter period, but there have been abnormal reports. Our beekeepers have seen an increase in their honey supplies. We use the folks that we do, the beekeepers that we use, because we have a sustainable source. And they do a couple of things. Some of them have gone back to good old-fashioned beekeeping methods. It's not just, there are several issues. Pesticides is definitely number one. We've proven that it is the neonicotinoids in the pesticides that is directly targeting the honeybee. So that's definitely an issue that we need to take up. And we now use certified organic honey from Brazil. So we need to ensure that the honey that we get is the best. You know, nature's very simple, Brad, garbage in, garbage out. It depends. Here's a fact for you. A honeybee is not going to fly further and it's not going to work harder to get the sugar source it needs to make the honey. If the closest sugar source a bee has is a Coke can in the gutter, guess where he's going to go? So we have to be careful about where our honey supplies come from.
Makes sense. Hey, Michael, how closely do you actually work with beekeepers and honey suppliers when you source honey for your meads?
Yeah, so we're using almost 100% certified organic honey at this point. We became the first certified organic winery in the state of New Hampshire last year. We've only got 2 right now that are certified organic. We're working on a few more, but it's a fairly lengthy process. So I get honey samples from all over the world, Hawaii, Brazil, Mexico, to name a few local suppliers. And we buy a lot of honey at this point. I mean, most of the time, the smallest size package we'll entertain is about 3,200 pound tote, and we'll buy several at a time. So during the middle of summer, our season of fermentation is at its lowest. Once we head into early fall, we'll ramp up again, mostly with a lot of the cider production as well as our mead production.
And what kind of honey are you primarily using? Is it still orange blossom, or is there other types that you like?
Yeah, the wildflower honey that we're getting out of Brazil is really nice and light compared to the really dark mineral rich honey out of Zambia. The orange blossom we're getting now is coming out of Mexico. Really, yeah, it's amazing how many different varietals of orange blossom honey you can taste, and it's kind of like vanilla beans. You try one, then you try another one, and you dial it until you figure out where you like what you like. So we've really kind of shifted almost entirely our wildflower blend to an organic wildflower honey at this point.
Interesting. And Berniece, I understand the honey business is a little bit unique, at least here in the U.S., that it's dominated by small players, right?
Yes. The last estimate I saw, about 115,000 to about 125,000 beekeepers, largely small, family-owned. But they consider, if you have less than, let's say, 25 hives, they regard you as a small apiary. If you're a big commercial apiary, I believe it's like 300 plus hives. I know there's one very large supplier out in, I think, South Dakota. and they have something like 82,000 hives. So, but those are far and few between, and those suppliers generally are used to pollinate all the California, the big commercial agricultural farms, the big apple farms, the big apple
Central California, I assume.
Mm-hmm. And also, current events do affect that industry too. So we have to keep a keen eye on it. For example, 80 Harley Farms in South Dakota, that's the one I just remembered their name. They employ about 80 people. They have like 5 operations that they run. But they rely also on Nicaragua, on people coming over to seasonal workers. So it's all kinds of things affect our business, and current events do too.
And Berniece, Michael mentioned you getting it sounds like you're getting a lot of your honey from overseas now. What's driving that?
I'm sorry, Brad, say the question again.
What I said is, it sounds like you're getting a lot of your honey from overseas now. What's driving you to go overseas for, to Brazil or?
No, good question. When we first started, we used our local beekeeper, but obviously they only have so many bees who produce so much honey. One bee in its entire lifetime only produces about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Mm-hmm. So when people ask us, do you have your own bees? Heck no, that's a full-time job on its own. But as we've grown so quickly, and we use so much honey on an annual basis that it's difficult to find producers that can supply us the quantities that we need. So here in the United States, as a country, we are forced to import honey. We simply don't have enough bees to make enough honey. About 85% of our honey yields in the United States come out of the Dakotas.
And
go ahead.
Maybe I can jump in there. And help
go ahead, Michael.
Too. So the primary reason we've switched to organic honey is the bees don't have to fly and swim around any kind of pesticides, and the honey has a really nice light flavor. So it's not quite orange blossom in the lightness, but it's a very light, one of the best tasting honeys I've ever tried. So I've always guaranteed my customers we'll use the best ingredients we can get. Local's always great if it's great. The product quality has to be top notch. So my meads have gotten better as I've gone to using organic honey, and I don't see us switching anytime soon.
So, I assume the vast majority of the organic honey is probably overseas, right?
Like I said, out of Brazil. There's 2 spots in the world that have organic honey, and that's Brazil and Zambia.
Interesting. Well, Michael, let's switch over to the craft mead industry. You're seeing a huge number of craft meaderies enter the mead market. I've seen a number of them pop up locally. What do you think's driving the growth in the market?
A lot of success from people like me. I'll be, that's a little tongue in cheek, but I think people that have been home mead making have really demonstrated they have the technique to make commercial meads. And they have the aptitude and desire to want to be their own business person. There's no shyness of how much work's involved to make a company like ours even look successful or be successful. It's a lot of long days and a lot of long years, as it turns out. And it's make the best quality mead possible, and people will find it and buy it. And that's the key. We've just sent off samples to Puerto Rico, Belgium, and Poland. And if I get the opportunity to sell my mead in Poland, I'm going to be the first one on the plane to fly over and do a sampling event, because that's mead mecca. That's where the number 1 per capita consumption in the whole world is Poland for mead.
So how fast is the industry growing? Do you have any idea?
Well, it was about 50 meaderies when I started, and there's now about 500. So it's a tenfold increase over 10 years. So
let's say I do the math maybe a little bit faster, or roughly as fast as the craft beer industry. The craft beer industry has been growing large percentages too.
Yeah, and the challenge is it's not getting it on the shelf. That's the important part. It's pull through. It's branding and packaging, stability of product in the bottle, filtration, no sediment at the bottom of the bottle. There's a lot of canned meads now in the marketplace. You got to have your game pretty tight to make sure you're not having any kind of carbonation issues. Mm-hmm. I can tell you there's 1,000,001 opportunities for things to go wrong. And that's why you really need a good insurance company.
And you've had some challenges over the year, if I recall, right?
Yeah, we just wrote off 674 cases of one of our ciders. Thankfully, we got all of it back before anybody got hurt. We had some re-fermentation taking place in the cans. We checked to have all the lab work done. No micro-contamination, just the yeast was still going. So when you buy a high-tech filter, make sure you understand its spec ranges and how much yeast you'll have left over and what happens if something wasn't done quite the way you expect.
So with so many meaderies entering the market, where do you see innovation happening in Mead?
Well, I don't know if there'll be...
What are some of your creative competitors doing, perhaps?
Well, there's definitely a lot more focus on trying to go after the lower ABV, sessionable, comparable to a cider mead. Once you get under 7% alcohol, the TTB rules don't particularly, they apply, but not the same way they would for a wine. It more becomes like a beverage, which a beer and a cider are technically qualified as a beverage. So you can have it in a 12-ounce can versus a 375 milliliter can. And you can, you don't have to get your label reviewed, although it does have to, hold up to the standards that they would normally apply to you. And you can go through the FDA site and get exemptions on nutritional requirements and such. So that's where I see the most growth. However, what we're seeing and we're bringing on, we just grew our staff this week, but we're not announcing that 100% yet. But we're bringing on.
You just did.
We're bringing on Midwest sales opportunity as we can, because we're seeing almost. It's pretty crazy how much growth opportunity we're seeing. Just in one state, for example, Ohio, we went from $15,000 in sales in 2018 to over $45,000 the first month, 6 months of this year, and that was with only 3 weeks of my time in the marketplace. So we see bigger chains trying to move into picking up the best meads they can, and we're at the forefront of making that happen.
Well, Berniece, you got a number of new things going on too, I think, and Michael mentioned some of them up front. But what are some of the new things you've been working on at Moonlight?
We've released, along those lines, we've also released a session mead, but we released Little Apples, which is our lightest cider that we make. 13.5 is the bigger cousin to that. It's a 13.5% cider. Those are both canned. Both of them are American aged in American foeders. We've released G-Sting, which is a dry ginger cider. What she said, raspberry cider, and we just recently released Sam's Strawberry, which is a strawberry session mead. So our dog Sam passed away, led a good life. He was 13, and this was our ode to Sammy. Sammy used to always get the strawberries before we could, so this was our little ode to Sam. And
you always do food pairings as well, or often have done food pairings at the Homebrew Con. I just came to me off the top of my head, but do you have any thoughts on foods that go well with meads?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything from, let's say, fling is one I can think of right off the top of my head.
And which one's fling? Help.
Fling is the strawberry rhubarb.
Strawberry, yeah.
So it's a combo. Chilled, I would serve it as an aperitif. That sort of dryness, the drying out in the finish with the rhubarb, puts it right in that category of an aperitif wine, if you like. And I would serve that with a goat cheese salad, or left at room temperature, you could serve that with a New York cheesecake, for example. So that's the beauty of mead, is that it's so versatile. Cooking with meads is actually opposite to grape wine, because when the alcohol dissipates, the flavor doesn't. The honey holds on to the flavor, so they're actually really good wines to cook with.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of it as a dessert wine, but I guess you potentially could use it for appetizers. You could use it for cooking, I guess. I've never tried cooking with it, but...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, with our drier meads, I like to, when I'm in the tasting room, I love it when people come in and they've never tried mead before. I like to wow them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give them something like Embrace or Temerity, which is our 2 blackcurrant meads. Those are absolutely on the drier side. More tart.
Yeah, they're a little more wine-like, if I recall,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
But they get the taste buds going, and people are always completely shocked. I actually call them shock your socks off mead.
Blackcurrant's one of my favorites, so I can relate. Well, great. Michael, I wanted to go back and ask you about mead making techniques and how they've changed over the last 9 years at Moonlight Meadery. I would imagine quite a bit, just in terms of volume. I know you started as a farmhouse, literally a farmhouse winery license, I think, right?
Yeah, we were fairly same license we have today, but we were just different scale. We were making 5-gallon batches when we first started, and now the largest batch size we have is 100 barrels. And had you asked me if I'd ever be doing 100-barrel batches back in 2007 or 9, I would have laughed.
You actually have 100-barrel fermenters?
Yeah, we have 100-barrel fermenter conical. We have 2 100-barrel fooders, and we have a 100-barrel bright tank. And we have a 60-barrel conical, and then it drops down to the 1,000 and 500-gallon tanks. But we keep fairly, like I said, we're selling about 1,000 cases a month. We're listed by the state of New Hampshire as the #1 production winery in the state at this point.
Wow.
And, we've been taking some best of shows of recent. We took best of show at the San Diego International Beer and Cider competition, beer, mead, and cider. And then we took a best of show in Ohio at Best of the Burbs. And it was a nice little story. It was my birthday. I'm walking in to do the event, and I see this huge trophy off to the side. I'm like, hey, what's with the trophy? They go, oh, it's for the best beer. And I look at him, and I said, well, a little presumptuous, don't you think? And sure enough, I won.
So, I mean, have things really, are you still making mead the same way you were when you were a home brewer, or have you really evolved over time?
Well, the tools I have at my disposal have certainly upgraded quite a bit, from the mixers to the filters and stuff. I mean, we have a cross-flow filtration system that can filter as fast as 30 gallons a minute. And, you couldn't do that at home. I mean, it wouldn't even take up the amount of waste that you'd have in the system for that 5-gallon batch. But it definitely makes my job a little more easier to be able to have that kind of finite control over things. The fooders, we're doing a Solera method for
what's a fooder? I'm sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, it's a 100-barrel oak vat. So it's basically like the biggest wooden barrel you've ever seen. Ours are about 12 feet tall, 8 feet across, and they hold about 3,200 gallons each.
Wow. And what do you do with that? What's special about that?
So we got to have them custom made. So the American Fooder Company out of O'Fallon, Missouri, did the work for us. They're absolutely beautiful. They made the same fooders, or bigger ones, for like the brewery out of California and several others. And so I got to specify the toast level. We sanitized the fooders when they came in with rye whiskey, so we let the whiskey evaporate into the oak to kind of precede the flavors that we wanted to get from them. And now we're doing a Solera method, so as we pull the cider out of the fooder, we'll put more back in. The cider that goes into these fooders are already fermented and filtered, so we're really trying to avoid any kind of contamination, and trying to really make sure we have a really soft and gentle oaking on the cider that we're making. But we make essentially 2 or 3 different ciders out of the 13.5% apple honey mead, more or less, that we put in the fooder to start with.
And that's another big thing that's changed. You're doing cider now, and I think you were targeting braggot as well, right?
Yeah, we've been struggling on the braggot front. The brewery that we've chosen has, they got hit when DME went out of business, and they eventually got their equipment, and now they've got a pilot brewery coming in. So we want to do a pilot batch first before we ramp it up full scale. But and I don't have a home brewery anymore, so it's hard for us to just whip up a quick little batch of my recipe. But
for the braggot, Well, braggott's also in a little bit of a legal tween land, right?
Yeah, well, breweries can make them, wineries can't. So we have federal wholesaler permit and a federal winery permit and an importer permit. So worst case scenario, I could go outside the country and make it legally and then bring it all back in. But what we're going to do is work with a brewery to contract brew my recipe. They'll do it under my name, so we'll license the name Hidden Moon Brewing Company. We'll get the first one made and make sure we're all happy with it. Be a lot of tasting, sampling, of course, quality control. And once we're ready to go, we'll start releasing it. But I can tell you, it's making some. I just can't wait, and it seems like no matter how fast I get in a hurry to make it happen, it just takes longer. So we're trying to be patient.
Yeah, I enjoy your brag. I've had some of your brag. You brought it to HomebrewCon 2 years in a row. I'm trying to remember now.
Probably closer to 5.
5 years, okay. Well, I'm not sure I get it all 5 years, but it was good. Very good.
Thank you.
Berniece, we talked a little bit about which meads are popular at the moment, but it's kind of interesting. This has changed over time, right? I think when you started out, it was maybe Desire was most popular, and then how has it evolved over time?
Well, Desire still remains my personal favorite.
Which is, I should mention, when you mention the brands, maybe mention what it is, just so because I know what Desire is, but folks listening may not.
Absolutely. So Desire is our flagship. It's the one we started the company with. It's a blueberry, blackcurrant, black cherry mead. Mm-hmm. And so that's always remained one of the top ones. Kurt's apple pie was our top seller for many, many years until we came out with No Need to Argue. Fling is our third bestseller. So those consistently remain at the top.
And Fling is strawberry, and then the new one is...
Cranberry.
And
the Kurt's apple pie is apple with honey. So we dilute the honey with apple cider, and then post-fermentation add Vietnamese cinnamon and Madagascar bourbon vanilla beans.
Which I've had also is excellent. Very good. So, it has changed over time, right, Berniece? You think it's just people's tastes are changing or innovation in the industry? What do you think?
I don't know so much. Here at the tasting rooms, we make over 80 varieties, Brad. So, there's always something new. You have your consistent top sellers. And every now and again, we'll throw a disruptor in there and do something like monkey business. So it's hard to say, is it a top seller, because it's a small batch and it sells out so fast. So it's a little difficult. But I think that as a whole, the industry, people's palates have evolved. Mm-hmm. And people demand, they want selection, they want variety. So while we have our consistent meads that sell out or are our top sellers, those we have a core 6 that we distribute. So obviously we move a much larger quantity of those. So it's hard to make that comparison. Michael likes to joke and he likes to say, this is my favorite today. And if it's you selling it and you're passionate about it, it sells.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so part of it, why the innovations and stuff. So a few years back, I created this Lunar Society. And what is the Lunar Society? That's a really exclusive, limited to 50 people group of folks that have access to all my meads, specifically the ones that I don't release to the public or just make for these folks. And part of my promise to them is I'm going to continue to innovate. And the innovation is what gives me the most satisfaction in the mead making. So like I said, we're working on a banana bread. We came out with Monkey Business, which was a chocolate, orange, vanilla, and banana mead. We've been playing around with small batches. We've done some collaborations with the Satipaja meadery out of Sweden, I think. And sorry, Chemo, if I got it wrong. But they're good friends of ours. And, we're making a full lambic style mead that we, I don't expect it to be ready for another 5 or 6 years. It started with a 40 bricks starting gravity, and the Brett is just working its way through it really slow. And it's, honey does not tend to be favorable for a lot of the wild spontaneous yeasts. And I've been looking into some of the newer yeasts that are coming out just to play. It's nothing makes me happier than to try mead like we're releasing Fulfillment, which Laura Augustine out of Louisville, Kentucky, submitted to a competition that I judged it and gave it a 50, and it was a cinnamon hibiscus. And, I went hog wild on this. I made 125 gallons. So it's got a beautiful flavor to it, nice cinnamon, light cinnamon in the background. We're going to have 2 kegs going into Louisville for a tap takeover. I don't know the bar yet. I'm still working with my distributor. But I'm hoping that Laura and a lot of her friends and fellow homebrewers will come join us. So she got to name the mead. She worked on the recipe for us, and I took my skills of ramping it up to a full-scale recipe. And also recently released a only for the homebrewers the homebrew a cucumber and lime mead that had a really nice.
I had some of that. It was excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It had a unique flavor to it, and that was based off of Jim Davis's recipe out of Colorado. Again, same competition. Gave it a 50. It was just spot on perfection, and that's what I look at for when I'm judging meads: is how do you evaluate a mead? And you can't go looking for honey. You want to look at the totality of the beverage and how does it all pull together so that you can get the aroma. And if you can get the aroma to be perfect, the rest is usually going to fall right into place, because if the aroma's off, it's hard to make up for that initial presentation. So there are a couple home mead makers that I put in my top 10 list of these are the folks I want to work with. Tom Reapus, North Dakota, is one of them. Carvin Wilson, just to name a few. And there's way more than I could name here, but I've already mentioned a few other names. And these people are literally artists, because if you look at the complexity of how is making art is putting paint on a canvas. But how do you make that a work of art, right? So that's where the science and the skill comes in. But there's also the mind's eye that allows you to create that. Like, I can barely draw my name, so I'm not ever going to try to paint a painting. But, what I can do is create a mead that's distinctive and unique in style to what I've done. And when I've taught at the UC Davis courses, the first time they asked me, I was trying to think to myself, how do I tell people how to make mead? Because I've done it so much, I've forgotten. It's just intuitive to me at this point. I don't have to think about all the little steps you need to make sure you have a sanitized process. And here's the techniques. And by the way, after a few days, you want to check on this and stir that up, and come back around and taste it and think about your flavors and see where you're going to take it to at the finishing line. Literally, I've got this new batch of Smitten coming in, which is our peach mead, and we've gotten certified organic peaches to use with the organic honey, and it tastes like no other peach mead I've ever tried. And we were fortunate enough to get invited to the Destruce Beer Festival in Oostleven in Belgium earlier in July. And it was the first keg to kick of ours. And, to be at a festival like that and be honored by brewers from around the world and share my passion is something that's really hard to put a value on.
So, as we're seeing a lot of mead, really start to enter the mass market, I guess you still see a strong market for these, designers, specialty, one-of-a-kind kind of meads, much like we're seeing on the beer market now.
Yeah, there's been some good innovation on this front. 9 years ago, I was at the higher end of the price point, and now my traditional or my core offering is closer towards the bottom. So people are willing to pay for really top quality meads, and as a result, we've worked hard to make sure we can make a living by having some of our heavier fruit meads that are really expensive, earn some money for us. So the newest batch of Red Dress, which you can order on our store online, it's about $22 a bottle, and that's still fairly reasonable compared to some of my colleagues in the industry, and I think you're getting value for your dollar. If you look at what a good ice wine would cost, it's not even close to that in price point. Yeah,
wines just go through wines go insane, or they can anyways.
Sure. We our highest price point is for our barrel-aged Utopian spin-offs. So we have heather blossom, which is our honey out of Scotland. Been aged for 6 years in a used Sam Adams Utopias barrel. And, we've got 2 variants right now. So the Chattanooga Distilling Company did a barrel swap with us. So they sent us fresh barrels. So we have a double barrel aged version, and then we have a single barrel aged version. But all these things are something, if you got mead consumers that want to try something that is unlike anything else in the world they're ever going to try, I'd recommend starting there. But I'll warn you, they're expensive. They're $125 a bottle.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty expensive. Well, Berniece, where do you see the mead industry going the next few years?
I still see, I don't think that we've reached the peak at all. I think that the meaderies that have been around have done a really good job. And I like to think that Moonlight has played a major participation in that. We've really spent a lot of time and money and effort trying to build that mead market. And what we're seeing now is that there is definitely a much wider appreciation for mead. Mead is being regarded as that category, which is really what we've been pushing for and educating the industry on. Here's an example for you. When we first started 9 years ago, I would ask every single customer coming into the store whether they had had mead before. Did they know what mead was? And 99% of people had not had mead before or didn't know what it was. Today, it's the opposite. We very rarely get people that come in that don't know what mead is. So I think we've done a good job at getting the word out there and putting mead on the forefront again. We've taken something old, we've made it relevant, and we've made it new again. And I think with over 400% growth of meaderies in this country, I mean, just here in New Hampshire, we now have 4. We're a tiny state. So mead seems to be following that path of craft beer. Like craft beer, at some point we may reach a saturation level. Distribution is still a major, major challenge for small meaderies, which is probably why you're seeing a lot of smaller meaderies pop up throughout the country, because distribution is still a major challenge. I see session meads growing. People want portability. There tends to be a trend of trying to pull people from the wine side over, and that's a really good transition for people who've never had mead before they'll try an experiment with the bigger, bolder meads. Canning, I see canning is just going to continue to grow. That's a concern for us. We're watching the bottle manufacturing trends in the industry because canning is such a big thing now. So, but there's definitely a growth. I'm encouraged because now when we travel the country, we go into these big accounts and they actually have a mead section. Think about it. I mean, when we came into the market, there were very few meaderies that distributed. I believe Schultz's was the only one. So, yeah, I mean, and the more we all band together, story about mead, and we can do a greater, better job at educating the public.
And I think the quality's improved quite a bit too. Early on, some of my friends had mead, but a lot of them have never had any good mead. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I agree with you. And I think as we go into the future, that is definitely something as an industry that we have to work at, is keeping the quality of mead at a higher level.
Well, Michael, your closing thoughts on the craft mead industry as it is now?
Sure. One of the things that kind of troubles me a little bit when I talk to restaurateurs about doing events with them is the notion of mead cocktails, where they're trying to blend it in with tequila or vodka or some other type of thing. You know, the art of the beverage wasn't made to be created as a mix-in. So part of the events I've done over the years where they have tried to do this, the customers have actually said, no, we want to try it straight up. We've driven a long way to try Michael's Meads, and this is what we want. We don't want tequila in with this.
This reminds me of my daughter getting into the. One day she got into my Scotch whiskey and started making 7 and 7s out of it. You know, like 18-year-old Scotch. You know.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Bring home a $400
Did not make me happy.
I can appreciate. So, I think the meat industry is finally getting to the momentum it needs to get to be successful. But it still takes tremendous amount of work to work with distributors. Everyone thinks a distributor is a sales team. They're not. They're really just a mechanism to get product from point A to point B. And if it sells through and they're keeping an active eye on it, they might get another case to the same store. But, I've got my son running my West Coast operations out of San Diego. Like I said, we're bringing on someone in Ohio, and, we've got the East Coast. So, we've got a national footprint at this point. And, we still make it all here from Londonderry, New Hampshire. We've got a 6,000 square foot warehouse. It's still small, mom and pop operation. We're really... I could have kept my day job and made a hell of a lot more money. So I wanted to do something I love.
I appreciate that. Berniece, you got anything you want to add here at the end?
Yes. The only other thing that I'd like to say is when I think about coming from a homebrew history, that's the one thing that I've always appreciated with the mead industry. Most of us were homebrewers. And when we went professional, we didn't lose what we learned in that homebrew community. And we don't reinvent the wheel. We're not, I find the wine industry is very, very different. And I think it's because wineries have to fight so much harder to differentiate themselves in the market. The competition is just so high. But for meaderies, I think even with the startling rate that meaderies are growing at, I think if we continue to band together, here is what I always tell people. I don't consider other meaderies my competitors because every dollar that they're spending on educating the public is a dollar less that I have to spend. But collectively, we can continue to support associations like the American Mead Makers Association, the Homebrewers Association, and collectively, our collective voices, together we can have legislation changed and update antiquated liquor laws. We can continue to educate the public, educate the industry as a whole, and let that mead category continue to grow.
Well, thank you, Berniece. Really appreciate you coming on the show for the first time.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here.
And Michael, I think it's probably at least your fourth time on the show. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Brad. Thank you so much.
So my guests today were Michael Fairbrother and Berniece de Berg, co-founders of Moonlight Meadery. Great to have you guys on. Thanks, Michael.
Cheers.
Thanks, Berniece.
Cheers.
Well, a big thank you to Michael Fairbrother and Berniece de Berg for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They're currently offering 20% off their all-access subscription pass with access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com/BeerSmith to get your all-access pass today. Again, that's beerandbrewing.com/BeerSmith. And also the Brew Easy Brewing System. Brew big in small places with the best all-grain, ultra-compact system available. The Brew Easy's revolutionary setup combines batch sparge efficiency, brew in a bag simplicity, and the wort clarification of a rim system. It's easy to set up, easy to operate, and easy on the eyes. Electric and propane models are available, and it's also the system that I personally brew on. Visit blickmanengineering.com to learn more about the Brew Easy. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And finally, BeerSmith 3 is available for download on both desktop and mobile platforms. BeerSmith 3 adds mead, wine, and cider support, new whirlpool hop options, support for high-altitude brewing, and a whole lot more. Check out BeerSmith 3 brewing software and get your free 21-day trial today from beersmith.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great brewing week.